This time last year, I received a pretty interesting phone call. It was a phone call from an ad agency asking me if it was possible to jump from a mountain, fly down in my wingsuit, and grab a bag of donuts mid-flight. If they'd asked me to do that 15 years ago, I would have said they were out of their mind. I was a city girl, and I was very comfortable in my city girl lifestyle. But when I turned 18, I wanted to try something different, and I wanted to see how it felt to push myself outside of my comfort zone. So I went skydiving. Riding up in that airplane, it felt like everything was moving very, very fast. We arrived at jumping altitude, the instructor strapped me on, and we went to the back of the airplane. And before I knew it, we were falling. My senses were on full alert. I remember hearing the sound of the wind rushing by. I never knew wind could sound like that, and feeling the force of that wind pushing against my body. I never knew something invisible could be so strong. I was so overwhelmed that I wasn't breathing. And it wasn't until 15 seconds into my jump that I told myself I had to breathe. And oh my gosh, this is the coolest thing in the world. I can't believe I'm falling through the sky. Wow! When I landed, I felt like my body was going to explode with that excitement. My life had changed. I went from being that city girl to what we call a drop zone rat. Someone who spends all their extra time at the airport jumping as much as possible. I was even out there in the middle of the winter, and I had to put hand warmers down my sleeves just so I could stay warm as I was falling through the snow. Skydiving opened my eyes to a whole new world of adventure sports. I started paragliding, rock climbing, snow kiting, wingsuiting, base jumping. And that was all 10 years ago. Now, my preferred sport is mixing the two disciplines of wingsuiting and base jumping into one. I take wingsuit skydiving, where I'm jumping at 13,000 feet above the ground. It feels like I have all the time in the world to fly my suit around, and it's quite safe, because I'm in the middle of nowhere. Base jumping is a little bit different. In base jumping, I'm jumping from a fixed object or a cliff. I only have a few seconds of free fall before I have to open my parachute. And when my parachute opens, I'm still right next to that cliff I just jumped from. So I don't have much time to fix it if my parachute's facing any direction other than directly away from that wall. Which is why base jumping can be quite dangerous. And this is also why wingsuit base jumping seemed like a safe alternative. In wingsuit base jumping, now, I'm jumping off that cliff and flying down out away from that mountain. Now, I can open my parachute in the middle of the valley. Instead of just a few seconds of free fall, now I have up to a minute of flight where I'm flying with the mountain, following its terrain and features just a few feet off the ground. Once I realized everything that wingsuit base jumping had to offer, I knew I wanted to dedicate my life to it. So I quit my nursing job in the US, and I moved to France.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
3, 2, 1. See ya. So amazing.
Now, I'm always looking for that next big challenge, which is why I was so excited to get the phone call asking me if I wanted to grab this bag of donuts while flying my wingsuit. Only a handful of people at this time had actually hit a target while flying in their wingsuit, and I wasn't one of them. And of the few people who had hit a target, they were hitting targets that were nearly double our arm span. Now I was going to try to hit a target the size of a paper bag. And not only was I going to try to hit this target, I was going to be the first person to ever try to fly away with something like this. I knew it was going to be tricky, and I had to be methodical with how I approached it. So I broke it down into two major components. There were the physical aspects and the mental aspects. Physically, I had to be able to hit a target, and I needed to learn how to fly away with one. Mentally, I needed to not crack under pressure. So I started out with some target practice. We set up a mock target in the Ensa Couloir at the Brabant. This is a beautiful line to fly. It's very smooth and natural, and it looks a lot like a runway, which is perfect for getting me to my target. My first jump, I jumped off the cliff, turned around the corner, and then I dove down into the couloir. I looked up to get an eye on my target, and I couldn't see anything. I was flying at 180 kilometers per hour just a few feet off the ground. I was much more concerned about what was coming up in my immediate future that I couldn't see a little target at a distance. I realized I was going to need to set up some landmarks to help get me to my target. A week earlier, there had been a small avalanche in this couloir. And thanks to this recent snowslide, there was a beautiful line of snow right down the middle of the couloir. I used this as my first landmark to get me there. Then, I asked my assistant to dress in really bright colors. That way, when I got closer to the target, I knew exactly where it was. After making a few more jumps, I was able to slowly start piecing together all these visual cues, and after a few days of jumping, I was finally hitting this target consistently. Now that I knew I could hit a target, I needed to know if I could fly away with one. No one had ever tried to do something like this before, and this is probably for obvious reasons. When we're flying just a few feet off the ground, we want our suits to fly as efficiently and with as little drag as possible. Just a small fold in my leading edge can affect how I fly. So imagine what putting a paper bag on my leading edge would do. I had no idea. I decided to do a test jump from a helicopter at 10,000 feet above the valley. Jumping at 10,000 feet would give me plenty of space and time to get a feel for flying with this bag in a safe environment. When we arrived at 10,000 feet, I grabbed a hold of the bag and I jumped out. But immediately, I was struggling to stay in control. This bag I was holding onto was acting like a giant handbrake, and it was trying to drive me in circles. In a situation like this, I can't freeze up. I have to manage the situation. So I started moving my body into all these new awkward positions, trying to compensate for this awkward bag I was flying with. And eventually, I found a solution. I had to completely bend one of my legs to counteract that force that was driving me in a circle. Now, I could open my parachute and land safely. But in a position like this, I'm not flying, I'm falling. And in a base jumping environment just a few feet off the ground, this wasn't gonna work. I realized I would need some serious airtime if I wanted to be able to fly with this bag and not have it hinder my flight performance. So I went skydiving. Jumping from 13,000 feet above the ground gives me up to 3 minutes of free fall every jump I make. The first few jumps out there, I was having a really hard time flying. My suit felt really twitchy, and all the friends I was flying with were flying much faster than me. But after jumping all day, every day, for a week, I came up with some techniques. And now, I was flying with that bag, and I didn't even notice it was there. Finally, I was physically ready to do the stunt. But this is where the mental aspects come into play. When I'm base jumping, it's just me, the mountain, and a few friends. But for this project, there was going to be the ad agency, the client, the production team, the construction team, some donut artists, the heli team, and the athlete team. And they were all counting on me. So needless to say, I was under a bit of pressure. So in order to decrease my level of stress, I chose to do this in a location I know very well. I've been jumping at this mountain for years. And I know which lines I can fly and which lines I can't. When I'm flying close to the ground, I try to choose a line that's very smooth, natural, and easy to follow. But unfortunately, the line that I love to fly at this mountain doesn't have a safe location for a target. However, just 20 meters to the right, there was a perfect location for a target. But by moving my target just 20 meters to the right, my approach completely changed. Instead of having a nice smooth line to follow, now my approach looked more like a roller coaster. And it was really hard for me to analyze it. Because I was having a hard time analyzing my approach, I was getting stressed. And when I'm stressed, I get tense. And when I'm tense, I don't fly well. I was putting more and more pressure on myself and getting more and more frustrated. The more jumps I made, the lower and shorter I was coming up on this target. I couldn't understand what was happening because I knew I could fly this line. I'd been doing it for years. And then I got some wise advice from a friend. Ellen, when you're thinking, you're sinking. I was overthinking, and I needed to find a way to clear my mind. So I asked my air-to-air cameraman to jump off the cliff in front of me so I could watch him fly. And I know it might sound strange, but for me, it's really relaxing to watch somebody fly through the air. And now with him leading the flight, I don't have to navigate anymore. I can keep my head down with my eyes on him, and in a position like this, I'm flying much more efficiently. Now that I was relaxed and flying efficiently, I was arriving at my target so much higher. Now I had a beautiful bird's eye view of my entire approach. I found a few different landmarks I wanted to put in place to help get me there. And after making a few more flybys, I had finally dialed in my line. I'd been jumping for 4 days now, and I still hadn't hit the target. We'd arrived at our 5th and our final day of filming. I arrived at the top of the mountain. The air was still, the sun was shining. Everything felt perfect. I walked up to the edge of the cliff, put my toes over the edge, took in a deep breath, and 3, 2, 1, see ya. Dialing it in. Oh, that one was bumpy. I had to bail.
What was she?
Is that too low?
She was close, even under, I think.
She's earned out the baggage.
She took out all 3 strings.
I broke all the strings on the bottom of the bag. I was just that much too low. It's just hard because it's so close. We're gonna wrap this up in the evening. I'm just gonna go do a flyby, and I look over at the Dunkin' Donuts and I was like, oh, I've got this. Like, this is mine. Oh my gosh, that was like the coolest thing ever. It was perfect, like everything felt so good. Like I had good speed, good altitude, like coming right in on the bag, seeing everything exactly how it should be. Such an amazing thing to accomplish. I did it! I accepted a challenge that most people thought was impossible. And I didn't do it because I'm particularly skilled, but because I worked really hard, and I believed in myself. And I know it's cliche, but it's true, that confidence is key. And I believe that anything is possible if you have the confidence to do it. Thank you.